And apart from the fundraising bootcamp, or included with the fundraising bootcamp, we'll also talk a little bit about the importance of branding and messaging for fundraising. Um, I think that makes a huge difference. And we've been watching companies succeed in getting these meetings and getting traction with investors for years. And I think the main differentiator is the ones who are best able to communicate what they do. So super important. We'll talk about that today.
Yes, there's essentially two parts of the bootcamp today, the fundraising bootcamp and branding and messaging. Okay, so let us, well, first we're gonna do like a quick overview of Life Science Nation, who we are, what we do. Obviously, you know that we put on the Digital Resi Conference this this week. And Greg, did you want to talk about the first couple things and I'll go through the second part?
Sure. So Life Science Nation started actually almost 10 years ago, and we started as a data company. We started by curating a database of life science investors, which didn't exist at the time. And our CEO found it was really hard for entrepreneurs anywhere in the world, anywhere where they happen to be located, to identify investors who might be a fit for them, and to know which investors are interested in a certain kind of technology and stage of development. So he thought, because he came from a data background, that's Dennis Ford, our founder, that this database would be really useful for fundraising companies. And we also partnered with a European partner venture valuation, and we curate together with them a company database, or what we call the business development database. And it's a really powerful tool tracking almost 60,000 companies. But it also has some really interesting other databases within a database, like clinical trials, and especially, and I was just on another webinar earlier today with Dennis Ford and Yafo Capital talking about licensing. And the company database actually has a really powerful database of licensing deals. That's also a great tool. And then finally, so we have the two databases, and then we have a product called Focus on Cures Accelerator. At some point in the future, this will be an in-person accelerator program, but right now it's done digitally. And basically, we work intensively with companies on their branding and messaging, on their fundraising strategy, sourcing and putting together a global list of investors to reach out to, and really help get them on their way using the Resi Conference, the database, all of the tools that we have. And then out of these relationships from the data business, we had this idea of starting a conference, the Resi Conference. So Ashley?
Yep, so that started with both those databases and our Focus on Cures Accelerator. We've kind of created this vehicle so we can have both of the buyers and the sellers connected in one spot, and really matching them based off of your stage of development and product and indication. And that's really a huge part of what our business model is. So just into 2021, we've created what we're calling the Health Tech Partnering Week, which starts off obviously this week, Resi, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Thursday and Friday, we have two new conferences that we've launched. The 4D Meets AI conference, which is focused on companies that have an AI technology piece. And then we have our longevity, health, and innovation meeting as well, happening on Thursday and Friday, which again, very similar, just has, when you have a product or a technology that's specifically for indications like Alzheimer's and dementia. So essentially, usually we go, once we're in person again, we're usually going across the world, starting at the JP Morgan conference in San Francisco in January, which we just had it digitally this past January. This week, we're usually somewhere in Europe with our European partners. And then we do one in June alongside of the Bio Conference. Then we have another Health Tech Partnering Week happening in September in Boston. And then we have our November Health Tech Partnering Week, which again, we're not sure what's going to happen this year in 2021, but as of right now, we're going sticking with the digital, which has been very successful. So we're hoping that you're having some good meetings this week.
And if it weren't digital, it would be in Asia.
Oh, yes.
But like I said, we don't know. In 2022, I think for sure we can say that the November conference will be in Asia.
Yes. So here we're just showing some of our Health Tech Partner Week attending investors. So these are a list of investors that you'll see not only at Resi this week, but also at our 4D Meets AI and Longevity Health and Innovation events throughout this week.
So you have to ask yourself, are you actively raising capital? You know, these are three important questions that you have to ask yourself, and really to find out if you're ready to fundraise. So are you actively raising? And do you know how long it takes? Because that's often a big difficulty for companies, is not having a realistic time frame in mind for their fundraise. So if you are actively fundraising, you have to keep in mind that it takes a lot longer than you think it will. And you know, we usually say 9 to 18 months is what you should count on to close a funding round. It could be a little bit less than that, and you know, there, of course, we've seen cases of companies that have raised money in 3 or 4 months, but it's very, very rare. So you know, you have to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And it will almost certainly take you longer than you think it will. So 9 to 18 months is a good kind of, I think it's a realistic time frame. And then how much does it cost? So, you know, fundraising is not free. There are a lot of costs involved. So, you know, we think that you need to plan for, you know, $60,000 to $80,000 maybe for a true global fundraising campaign. These costs, you know, in the digital era have probably come down a bit. You know, people are not traveling as much, so you'll see here just kind of a gross calculation is, you know, you need to get your branding and messaging and your marketing collateral together, and you'll probably need to hire somebody to help you with that. You'll have to go to at least one conference per quarter, at least do one or two road trips per quarter. You'll have to get your global target list of investors together and an infrastructure to manage all that. And then you'll have legal and IP and et cetera. So, you know, you have to plan to spend some money to have a successful fundraising campaign. Do you want to comment on this, Ashley, or do you want me to?
Why don't you take it and then I'll add anything as needed.
So what we have seen over the last several years is that the kind of the investor landscape has really been changing. And you'll see it at our conference today. You'll see the types of investors who are here, who are engaging with early stage companies. There, you know, it used to be in the olden days that you know, your only hope was once you got out of you know, very early seed stage funding, you had to find a venture capital firm. That was all there was. You had to find a VC. That was the only option out there. VCs, you know, were, you know, filling that void, but it was never easy. And now what we're seeing is, that seed stage, you have family and friends and angels. Angels are investing through later stages now. They're becoming more engaged. A lot of angel groups will invest in a seed round, and then in a follow-on round, they will reserve money for follow-on funding of companies. That's relatively new. But I think what I'd like to draw your attention to on this slide is that there are new types of investors, relatively new. I mean, they're not brand new, but I would say there are groups of investors who are extremely engaged with early stage companies now. That's the important message here. And these types of investors are not necessarily VCs. There might be some VCs who invest very early stage, and there are, and you'll find some at the Resi conference. But you'll find especially active types of investors like family offices. You'll see quite a few of them here. Some foundations are making equity investments now, and they have a fund structure that is working, almost like an institutional investor. So foundations are also really worth looking at. And then I would say probably the ones that are most active with early stage companies now are the big pharma, big medtech players, and the corporate VCs. So these VCs that are backed by a big corporation, and you'll see a lot of them here at Resi this week. They are engaging with early stage companies and making investments of all different sizes, from a few $100,000 to over $10 million. And it's really important for you as a fundraising CEO to identify all of these different types of investors and talk to as many people as possible. And that's why coming to a conference like Resi is really important, because it allows you to have, if you put a lot of effort into partnering and you have your branding and messaging straight, and you have a compelling technology, you may well have more than 10 meetings in the next couple of days, maybe more than 15 or 20. So, that is a huge opportunity to engage with different types of investors, because some of them might be family offices, some might be foundations, some might be corporate VCs. And you're going to get a lot of different perspectives, and you're really going to learn a lot in the process.
So now we're going to go into some of the myths around fundraising that you may not know, as if you're, just starting your fundraising journey right now, or if you just started in the last couple of months. So we're just going to go through 10 items that we have seen over the past, 10 years that we've been doing this, and just go through and go through them. So the first one that we have is funding choices. You're limited to the NIH grants, friends and family, angels, VCs. And Greg just kind of talked about this a little bit with the, those categories that we have here at Resi this week in our health tech partnering weeks. There's lots of different investor types out there. There's not just one particular type, and there's definitely not one particular type that you should go after. You should go after all of them. Fundraising is, as Greg mentioned before as well, a numbers game. So it's important to just stick with your list, get a good global target list that you have, that you've identified as, great for your technology and for your stage of development, what your lead indication is. And you're really able to do that with participating at partnering conferences like Resi this week, because you're really able to identify really good targets. And then go after all of them, follow up with them. Another myth is the regional players, so limiting yourself to people within your region. If you're attending this week, and you're able to really filter down, and you're able to see that investors that are interested in your technology and your stage of development are all across the world. And even though they might be in Europe or Asia, they're interested in investing in US and vice versa. So definitely don't limit yourself just to your particular region, because there's investors out there who are definitely interested in your technology.
Yeah, I was just on a call before this webinar with an incubator out of Italy who is attending the conference for the first time. And we agreed that for an Italian biotech or medtech company, there's just not enough VC or investment money in Italy for all of the projects that are being developed. So necessarily they have to look outside of Italy. And what Ashley's saying is, if you come to a conference like Resi, you can talk to not only players from Europe, if you're a European company, but you can talk to players from North America, from Asia, from all over Europe who might be interested in your technology. And it's becoming more and more important to do that because there isn't enough investment money available in some regions of the world, but there might be more money available in other regions. So reach out to everybody and talk to everybody.
Definitely. All right, as we continue on looking at the 10 myths, and Greg kind of touched on this earlier today about the average process takes 6 to 9 months. Honestly, it's going to take probably a little bit longer than that. We found that it really takes 9 to 18 months to really go after all of the global players that you need to go after. And just, again, some people just make the mistake to go through and kind of plan out and think that really they're going to make this thing happen in 6 months, which you just want to set your expectations that it's going to take you probably slightly longer than that. You're on mute, Greg. Did you just mention something?
No, I'm good.
Okay, sorry. I saw you were. Okay, so then number 4, it's not necessary to understand how each category of investors work, just go after them all. So this is definitely something that you want to be aware of. Each investor type, there are so many different kinds. You definitely want to do your research and make sure that you know what the investor, who they are, what their strategy is, their motivation, because each one is going to be slightly different. So you're going to want to make sure to base your conversations with that particular investor and investor type based off of that information. So really going through, doing your due diligence. It's not only just about getting, the right person, but you really need to make sure that you know exactly the type of investor you're speaking with. Really, it takes a lot of time, a lot of bandwidth, especially if you want to do it right and really get some funding that's going to help your company grow.
Yeah, I mean, some of the differences to keep in mind, just as an example, a VC will be investing out of a fund if they invest in your company, and that fund will always have a timeline and an exit goal for the investment they make in your company. So, the kinds of questions you would ask a VC about, what vintage is the fund that they're investing out of? What is their exit expectation? What is the timeline? These are things you would ask a VC. But if you were talking to a corporate VC, that's really not as much of an issue because a corporate VC probably has a different structure and probably doesn't have those strict timelines or a family office. So it is important to understand how different investors work and what their business model is. And one of the things we recommend to companies when they're meeting with investors is to have a whole list of questions ready to ask the investors, because that's where you can really understand which investors are a good fit for you and your strategy as a company.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Number 5, the science technology is the only thing that matters to the investors. No, of course, it's very important. We've been talking about, matching, how we match your technology with the investor and what they're most interested in. You have to also think about it from a personal standpoint. So these investors are going to be investing in you. They're going to be investing in your dream, essentially, of what your technology is. So it's super important that, of course, when you're having your meetings, especially this week where it might be the first time that you're connecting with these investors, that you need to connect with them on a personal level. Like, you need to have a really good relationship with them, because they're obviously going to be giving you a lot of money. So you're going to want to be comfortable with them, and they're going to be wanting to be comfortable with you as well. So I think that's one of the biggest things, that when we're talking with companies, I talk with companies every day, so does Greg, and just getting them to tell their whole story, because that's really what's going to sell you. And if you tell your story of how your company came about, and especially if it's a personal story, it's just going to resonate a little bit more with them. And we're going to go a little bit more into detail about your branding and messaging in a little bit.
About having many technologies and indications at once, and some companies think it's better to have a wider range of products and technologies. We actually think that it will make your job of fundraising more complicated. I was talking to a company the other day that was developing new drugs for I think it was 5 different indications, and they were completely different markets. Oncology, immune disorders, skin disorders, dermatology related. It's just, I think it really makes your fundraising difficult. And we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about branding and messaging. But it's probably better, and you'll see that when you are targeting investors, that they tend to invest in certain areas, or they might have indications that they're particularly interested in. And if you can pick your top indication, your lead asset, and really focus your fundraising project on that, it will help you find investors who are interested in that area and have more traction. Because if you're talking about such a wide range of indications, like this company I spoke to the other day, it really makes it difficult to find the right investor who would be interested in all of those technologies. It would almost have to be a big pharma player.
Yeah, and that'll definitely limit you for sure.
Yeah.
So you need, number 7 is you need a referral in order to get an investor meeting. Completely not true. We have found that if your technology is something that the investors are interested in investing in and it fits their mandate, of course a referral is going to help you, but it's definitely not required by any means. And that's why Greg mentioned, what it takes to really go on that global fundraise and what you need. That's why it's important to do your due diligence, do your research, get ready for that global fundraise, come to events like Resi where you're going to be partnered with investors, because investors are attending meetings like Resi and they're looking for deal flow and different technologies to invest in. So just because you know someone is not going to make or break your fundraising journey by any means.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times, that you can't reach out to an investor if you don't have a warm referral. And like Ashley said, it's absolutely not true. We work with many companies and we help them reach out to the right investors. If you do a targeted approach, you can absolutely reach out to investors with a professional, highly well-structured outreach and messaging, and you can absolutely reach out and you will get results.
Yes. Send investors as much information as you have. So we're going to go a little bit more into detail, I think, a little bit later when we talk about branding and messaging. But you want to make sure that your message makes sense. It makes you stand out. Investors are getting a lot of emails throughout the day, as you can probably imagine. And same goes for even during the Resi conference, they're getting lots of incoming requests. So you need to make sure that whatever message that you're sending out, of course, you want to be as detailed as possible and give all the information about your technology and your company. But if you just kind of throw something out at them and it doesn't really make sense and you're just kind of all over the place talking about your technology, and this kind of goes into what Greg was mentioning earlier about that client who just had, lots of different indications. If you really make a clear and concise message about what your indication, what your technology is, and really go into that very cohesive message, that's going to stand out based off of that information. It's just, you want to make sure it's very clear and concise.
Yeah, and that customer I was talking about, and I'll never say who it was. You won't get that out of me, but that customer, their outreach deck to investors was almost 40 slides long.
Oh no.
Packed with technical information about its products. And that is a huge mistake that so many companies make. Your initial outreach really is just to catch the attention of the investor and to get a first meeting. And there will be plenty of time to go into deep diligence. Let's hope, a lot of you have meetings with investors this week, that you will go into due diligence over the next few weeks and months. And then you'll be going into very deep detail, nitty gritty. But in that initial outreach, don't send a 30 or 40 slide PowerPoint. Nobody's going to read it. I mean, it would be very rare for someone to read through the whole thing. So what we're going to talk about in a minute in branding and messaging is how to create a concise branding and messaging for your company that will be effective in getting the interest of the investor, because that's what you want.
Definitely. I actually was speaking with someone the other day and they were asking me how many slides their presentation should be for Resi. And I'm like, 10 to 12 slides. It should be a quick, know who you are, what your technology is. And that's one of the biggest questions that we get, which is, again, why we're having this fundraising boot camp and branding and messaging today.
Yeah.
So number 9 is that scientists are the rock stars and don't need the business or the finance executives on the team. Well, of course, all of the scientists are rock stars. However, it is very important to also have a business development team that really has the background and the understanding to know how to commercialize and really go about the business aspect of it. And especially important when you're going on the fundraise. Something else to note too, a lot of investors might have some requirements based off of your management team. And sometimes it's really good to have, the really scientific person that can answer all of the scientific technology questions, but also having someone on the business side that can really go into your business model and your business plan and the timeline of everything.
Yeah, and keep in mind here that a lot of the companies that come to Resi are very early stage companies with a very small team. Maybe just a couple of co-founders are the only, full-time or, really making up the management team. And that's fine. But if you or your core management team or founders are lacking in business or finance experience, what you should do is be sure to have a board of, an advisory board, a business advisory board, and a scientific advisory board. Find people who have that relevant experience, who can, add to your team. And people are generally very open to participating if they think they can help your project. So think of ways to complete your team, but it's not enough to have rock star scientists and nothing else, because investors will want more.
So science is the, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying this is kind of the same message.
Yeah, so science is the hard part, but it's easy to learn the business side. We kind of just went in to talk about that. So a couple of notes that we have on the bottom of the slide here is just a couple things. So don't give up too soon. So you're going to have a list of investors. You create that global target list of your investors that you want to go after. I mentioned it earlier. Investors are getting lots of emails every day with companies like yourself, technologies that are interested to get invested. So it's important to keep going. Like, even if you don't hear, don't stop until you get that, especially if you've done your due diligence, they're a good fit for what your technology is and what stage you're at. Keep going. If you haven't received a no yet, that doesn't mean that they're not interested. Maybe it's just bogged down in their inbox. Maybe they just haven't had the time to review it yet. So keep going.
Yeah, and that's true even at a conference like Resi. Exactly the same thing. If you send out just one invite to an investor, the chances are you may not hear back. It's very, very common. But if you send several follow-up messages and really think about the quality of those messages and the information you're giving, there's a much better chance that they will get back to you with one way or another. So yeah, you have to continue to follow up.
Something else to know is that you definitely, when you're on a global fundraise, you need to have some sort of CRM, something like Salesforce.com, to keep yourself organized and making sure that you don't forget to follow up with those people that you haven't heard back from. It's not enough to just send one email and say, okay, I've reached out to that investor, and if I don't hear back, then it's a no, and if I do hear back, great. You really have to be organized. It's definitely not great to just keep it in an Excel format. You're going to want a global target list that's a little bit bigger than that. So then you can really check off your list and follow up with them as needed. And then once someone does say no, if that is going to happen, then you can move on to the next one and say, okay, this one is on my next person on my tier 1 list that I need to go after.
Yeah, and many times investors will say no, not right now, but when you get certain data or when you reach a certain milestone, then I would be interested in talking to you. It's very hard to keep track of all that. If you're talking to dozens or hopefully, even hundreds of investors, how do you keep track of the ones that say, yeah, reach back to me when you finished your IND enabling studies, or reach back to me when you have first in human, or whatever. To keep track of all that, it's really helpful. At Life Science Nation, we use a CRM. We use Salesforce.com, and we I don't know. I can't imagine life without it. It's what keeps us organized.
Definitely. And then the last note we like to mention is just because you have all of your marketing collateral, and again, we're going to start going into that in a minute, you can change your message. Like, getting feedback from investors is huge. And if someone is nice enough, in my opinion, to give you some sort of feedback, take it and, change your messaging as needed as you go along, because it might help you down the road for sure. We have a couple of questions, so I'm wondering if we should kind of go through those before we move on.
Sure, let's do.
So does the size of the team matter for a company raising a round? The CEO has major science and business background, and we have a fractional CFO as well.
I don't think that's an issue. I think the investor will look at the whole team, and a CEO who has experience in business is worth a lot, and it helps de-risk your company a lot. I would say that build a complete team of your core team and your advisory team, because this will really add credibility. And it might be your board of directors, it might be your scientific advisory board, or you might have some advisors who add value to your company because they have, it's great to have an advisor who's a serial entrepreneur who's had several exits. And if you find someone like that who's interested in your company, who will be on your advisory board, that would really be helpful for you. So even for raising a Series A, I don't think it's too small to just, have a minimal team like that. If you have a complete, advisory board and, other people who are supporting you.
And then another question, how long should you wait before following up? So in terms of Resi, definitely get into partnering as soon as possible, and follow up, I would say every couple of days. And then if you're talking about from your global target list and like outside of Resi, I would say probably a week to 2 weeks, Greg, if you want to correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say every couple of weeks when you're doing your outreach campaign, maybe a week to 2 weeks, and keep following up. It might take a lot of follow-ups before you hear back. And as Ashley said earlier, the fact that someone doesn't get back to you doesn't mean they're not potentially interested. So don't be discouraged.
We had one more question come in.
Okay.
Do your estimates of the time and cost of raising funds scale with the size of the raise? Is a seed round of less than $1 million going to take less time and effort than an A round? And I would say, I personally don't think so, but Greg, you can take it.
Yeah, I agree. You do have to plan for some costs, even if you're raising a seed round. The better your marketing collateral is, and we're going to talk about that now, it's just going to help you in your seed round, whether it's your seed round or your A round or your B round. Your branding and messaging is super important, and when you're doing this outreach. So
and fundraising takes time.
Yeah.
Especially in this life science market, for sure. Something that we just put up on the screen here is our CEO, Dennis Ford. We've mentioned him a couple of times, and he founded this company on the sole reason to help fundraising CEOs like yourself, scientists, entrepreneurs, really raise capital and go for that fundraising journey. So within the live agenda, we have a copy of the book available to you to just download for free. So feel free to go ahead and download that. And if anyone has any questions, I've already put in our Resi email address. Feel free to just reach out to any one of us and we can send it off to you. It could be a really great resource in your fundraising. And it goes into a lot of what our company, myself and Greg included, what we do every day with helping fundraising CEOs with their journey. All right. So now we're gonna
part two.
Yeah, so now we're gonna go into talking about branding and messaging, which is kind of integrated. We've talked a lot about branding and messaging and the importance of it. So now we're just gonna go a little bit more into detail of what we've found is really needed when you go onto your fundraising, when you're going your global fundraising. So here's a list. We're going to go a little bit more onto the next slide. But essentially your marketing collateral is super important. Greg mentioned it a few minutes ago as well. Making sure that you have a really clear message, you have your brand, all of your marketing collateral essentially at your fingertips so you can send it when you're going through and reaching out to all of the investors. You're able to communicate concisely and then present the information in a way that's going to make sense.
Yeah, it's one piece of the puzzle, but it's a really important piece.
So this slide here kind of is a big snapshot of what we're going to go through. Your marketing collateral should really be a logo that's very represents your company, not really super confusing and very precise. A tagline, a one-line tagline, not broad. You do not want something that's like the cure all the cancer, right? Like that's super broad and not really that useful to anyone if someone just happened to come across your company online. So you want to make sure that your tagline is very particular, very concise, a few sentences that's really going to show exactly what you do. Then it goes into your elevator pitch. Your elevator pitch is going to be a few sentences that's going to be give you a 1 minute, again, very concise information about what you do and what your company and technology is.
Yeah, and the tear sheet is it's a format that we use a lot at Life Science Nation. We recommend to companies. It's a one-page data sheet, basically. And we think that it's probably the most effective teaser to send out to investors, either at the Resi conference or in your outreach to investors. So we'll have a look at that as well.
Yep, then your executive summary, which is your 2-page executive summary, which goes really into more of the story of who you are, what you do. So you have your 1-page tear sheet and then your executive summary that really goes into the story of your company.
Yep.
And then
we talked about the slide deck. Don't send 40 slides, don't send 30 slides. When you're reaching out to an investor, you have to really learn how to synthesize and put something that's really compelling together that, you know, highlights all of the most positive and you know, the biggest value adds of your company in a concise way. That it's really hard to do. It's not easy, but you have to be able to net out, you know, what is the important data that I have to tell the investor. So just as an example, you know, if you can say we have initial animal data for our product, you don't have to put 10 slides showing all that data. You just have to tell them that you have it. There will be time to show them all that data, but in your deck, you want to point out what milestones you've reached without putting all of the evidence and detail and data in there to prove it. You don't have to prove it here. You can say that you filed 6 patents. You don't have to name them and put the patent numbers in there. Not necessary. And one thing that a lot of people ask is if they should put financial projections in this initial slide deck. And there are different opinions on this. My opinion is that you do not have to put this in here, not in this initial deck. So that's why it's important to keep it short.
Definitely keeping it short. And then the last 2 things, having a website is definitely going to help you. Again, it's just about your brand and really showing the investor that you have everything put together, you're ready to go, and you're really ready to start marketing and go to market, really start with your technology. And then having a quick video is always helpful.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes having a video is really helpful to illustrate the mechanism of action of a new molecule or of a medical device, for that matter. It can be really useful. So something to keep in mind.
So now we'll kind of go through each one, and having a logo that's very clear, crisp, it's obvious to what you do. It's not something that's going to be, you know, kind of, what is that little blob there doing next to the person's name? Like, you want to make sure that it makes sense with whatever your technology and your company is doing.
Now, there's an important thing about all of these logos, and you know, you may or may not like them, and that's you know, we can't do anything about that. You know, everybody has their own you know, aesthetic that they like. But one thing that I would point out about all of these logos is that they include the tagline. I think that's such a great opportunity. So we're going to talk about the tagline now. But, you know, why not include the tagline with your logo? And then everybody, you know, when you give them a business card, if at some point in the future we're able to meet again in person and exchange business cards, and on your card you have that tagline reminding them what your company does, it's a great opportunity. And if you don't have that together with your logo, it's a missed opportunity.
Definitely. So now we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the tagline, the importance of making it, you know, really stand out and explain in a few words what your company does, what your technology is. The more vague it's going to just be, the harder it is for the investor to really be able to look at who you are and what you do and get an understanding of what it is without too much, back and forth. I mean, honestly, when you're having these meetings with these investors, the quicker you can get to the point of this is what we do in the technology without too much back and forth, the better and the easier it is going to be for you to have that conversation and really get into the next steps in more detail around what you're actually doing as a company. If you're vague and it takes like 5 to 10 minutes to even figure out what you guys do, that's especially in a setting like Resi, the harder it is for you to get to that next level, to get them interested, even to get that follow-up call.
Yeah, I mean the vague ones. Some of the examples is here: inspired innovation or focus on health. They tell you absolutely nothing about what the company does. So it's not even worth it to have a tagline if it gives no information. And even the generalized ones, next generation protein therapeutics, that's a little better, but innovation in cancer detection, okay, getting there. But you'll see some of the other ones, even though they're a little bit long, but at least the tagline tells enough information so you can immediately understand what the company does.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was saying I used to I have some other examples that are really good, and I didn't prepare those in advance. Sorry about that. But
well, just looking at that first one, first-in-class serotonin receptor modulators for treating Fragile X syndrome. First, you're talking about the actual thing, the serotonin receptor modulators that you have, and then the Fragile X syndrome, like really netting out exactly what the technology is and what you have is better than inspired innovation or next generation protein therapeutics. Like just getting a little bit more in detail is just, again, gonna help you with your branding and messaging. Like,
yeah,
tenfold.
and first in class is also an important part of that because it immediately identifies what degree of innovation the company has. So I think that's also a really good thing to include that in your tagline in some way. If it's novel, if it's first in class, if it's breakthrough technology, words like that really, I think, help differentiate your technology and can be really compelling.
Definitely.
Hang on just a second. I'm just bringing up, I have a couple of examples of taglines that I think were really bad and really good. So these are, real companies that we've worked with. One of them this was a pharma company or a biotech company, and their tagline was innovate, design, optimize. Okay, so who can tell me what that company does? What are they developing?
No clue.
No clue. Or, an example of one of the general ones, taking the pain out of bladder cancer. And, so that's a little bit more specific and it helps a little bit in understanding what the company does. But it turns out this was actually a diagnostics company. So,
how are they taking the pain? That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, by diagnosing what the cause of the pain was, but still, it's confusing and it's not a good example. But here's one that I really like, and this is a medical device company, and the tagline is clinical stage biomaterials company reinventing surgical closure. Okay, so clinical stage, so we know what stage of development. It's a biomaterials company and reinventing surgical closure. So the reinventing is a really compelling term, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is something that's novel, that's an improvement on technology that's out there. So I think that is a good tagline. Or another company, a biotech company, that I really like their tagline because it's simple and to the point. Endogenous regenerative medicine for ophthalmology and beyond. So it gives enough information about what the company does and what their initial target is. But it also gives you the idea that their technology can be used for other indications in the future. So just a few examples. And for those of you in the audience, if you could think about your own tagline, if you have one, because some people maybe haven't created one for your company yet. But if you can think about ways to express, what you were doing. If we had time and were able to do an interactive session, we could go around and ask companies to tell us their tagline and comment on it. And this is something we often do in in-person boot camps, but unfortunately today we can't. But I'm glad we took a little bit more time to talk about taglines because it's something that a lot of people don't think about, but it can really help you in your messaging.
So if no one has a tagline, get on it and reach out to us. We're always interested to learn about different companies and help in any way that we can. So the next goes into the elevator pitch, and getting that really compelling tagline then makes it easier to transition and go a little bit deeper into your elevator pitch. We've been talking a lot about, very similar things of like the importance of a clear and concise message, making sure that it's exactly clear what stage of development you're in, which indications, what your technology is, and really having 5 or 6 sentences that you're able to like just off, you're talking with someone that's interested in investor, and really know what you're talking about. Having a super clear description, 3 to 5 sentences for your elevator pitch. And again, super important for conferences like Resi that you're attending now, and having this really great message.
Yeah, when I go to a networking event, of course, I'm not going to any now, but when in the olden days, when I used to go to networking events, or even the Resi conference, when you're talking to someone during the coffee break or at lunch, and you ask them, so what do you do? And you can really tell who has a polished elevator pitch, and they really have practiced and they've thought about what they're going to say. And, it just makes such a big difference. I'm not an investor, but if I were, I would be very impressed by someone who could really tell me in a few, in a minute or so, what they do and what makes their technology so special and what makes their company so special. That would catch my attention. And actually, in our Innovators Pitch Challenge, the format is you do a 1-minute elevator pitch and then take Q&A from the investors. And I know some of you are probably participating, and others, everybody has the option to attend the live Q&A sessions. You can find them on the Sessions tab in the partnering platform. But what's good about that is that it really is a challenge to net out to a panel of 5 investors what your company does in 1 minute and get them interested. So it's really important.
So we have about 5 minutes left, so we'll probably go as quickly as possible here. But again, I put it in the chat feature earlier. If anyone has any questions about anything, I'm also going to make sure that these slides are on the live agenda within our session as well, so you can take a look at these after the fact. The next one we talked about was the tear sheet. So having a 1-page data sheet that really is just bullet point, really clear information of who you are, having your executive summary, some bullet points, having the market opportunity need in one section, the technology, and then your milestones. Having it really set out in 1 page is very helpful. You'll notice that we have the logo on our example here with the tagline underneath it, all of the information of the management team on the left-hand side. We just find that this is a really great format for companies to use. So if anyone wants a copy of our example tear sheet that we have that we offer, again, feel free to email us and we're happy to send that along. What was that, Greg?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, that's available to everybody, but we think that's a super useful tool for reaching out to investors. The executive summary, this is, telling your story. It can be a little bit longer. We think 2 pages, can be 1 or 2 pages. And this tells a little bit more of the story of how your company came about and how it developed and, what you've achieved to date. And so, yeah, it's a story.
And then the slide deck that we keep telling you, 10 to 12 slides is perfect amount for this, your first current fundraise or your current fundraising journey is having, when you first reach out to that investor, sending them your 1-page data sheet, your 2-page executive summary, and your 10 to 12 page slide deck is perfect. Reach out with that information and that'll give them enough to, depending on what type of person, we're always saying like, well, why am I putting 3 documents together that essentially have all of the same information on it? And the reason why we found that that's the most useful and successful is because you never know who's going to be on the other side of your email, the investor, the person who they are. And one person might like looking at a 10 to 12 page slide deck. Someone might be wanting to learn more about the story and read the 2-page executive summary. Or the one person might be more interested in just the one sheet tear sheet. So that's why we find that if you send all 3 of them in that first initial outreach, the more success you'll have because you'll have all of the information there. They'll be able to select which one that they want to see and be able to easily figure out who you are and what you do. And then this kind of is just an outline that goes through the executive summary, what you should really talk about. Obviously, everything that we've already talked about, right? Your logo, your tagline, your technology, your time frame.
Yeah, you want this in your deck. It doesn't have to be in this order, but these are some important, excuse me, these are some important things that you want to have in your deck in those 10 to 12 slides. We had a question, Ashley, about whether this bootcamp would be recorded and would be available. And I answered online, but yes, it is being recorded. And the live agenda will be available for several weeks after the conference is over. And all of the live content is being recorded, and you can go back and you can look at any investor panel, workshop panel, this bootcamp, anything you want.
And then the last thing, which is also found on the live agenda, is we've talked a lot about the fundraising journey. Coming to Resi this one time, reaching out one time to an investor is not enough. You need to really continue to engage with all of the investors throughout the whole journey, throughout the whole process. And one thing, so we do have a June event coming June 8th through 10th. And just as for attending Resi this time, we do have a 10% off of our super early bird rate. So if you have any interest at all in attending in June, make sure to use the Resi June 10 discount code as you register. But thank you guys all. We're right up at the top of the hour. Have a wonderful rest of your day and happy partnering.
And have a great conference, everybody. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you.